My name's Bart Womack. I'm the CEO of Eden Grow Systems, which is a closed system ecological farming company. What we do is we build modular farms that can function in any environment anywhere on Earth. I'm also the inventor of some of the systems that go into it.
What types of projects are you working on right now?
So we just finished the development of, which was in phase 1 for LifePod version 1, and our CTO just finished his development of HAB1. Both of those were us testing, developing our closed system aquaponics. Now, thankfully, we're moving on to phase 2, which is us developing, taking the monitoring system that Jeff developed called the Genesis system in HAB1 and coupling it with AI and robotics to hopefully build the world's first fully functioning farm that requires no human interaction.
Where are you going to be putting these physically?
So, our first market that we've identified that's the best market is the prepper market and people that are interested in homesteading. But what we started to see was all of the same, desires and requirements: limited space, limited resources, limited access to water, you're far away from the supply chain. Answering all of those problems, all of a sudden we saw, well, wow, space is the exact same set of problems. So, that was how we ended up here today.
What is farming in space like?
Well, it's like, we got to eat, and it's not just about eating. It's, it's easy to make freeze-dried foods, but it's, do you want to have a quality of life if you're trying to have off-world settlement or colonization on other planets? Are you going to make it comfortable for people, or people are actually going to want to live there instead of eating prison food or MREs the rest of their lives?
Do you have to give up what you like here on Earth?
Well, and that's the core of our idea, is that, we want to have a future worth living. We want to have a human future. Survival is one thing, but whether it's here on Earth or in the, the great beyond, we want to make a life that people want to live. And, the reality is per our research, our food production systems here on Earth have to fundamentally change. We're running out of land, we're running out of arable land, we're running out of water. The White House released a projection a couple of years ago of what population growth will be by 2050. It's expected to be 10 billion people. And for there to be enough arable land to farm on using current farming technologies, there'd have to be another 1 billion hectares of land come available. That's roughly to give you a conception, that's a landmass the size of Canada. So the reality is we don't have enough land. So all of the problems that we're facing in space, limited resources, lack of long periods potentially without resupply, lack of land, lack of water, all of those problems are going to be experienced here on Earth as well. And that's the problem that we're trying to solve, is we're trying to take the best farming technologies, put them all together, and take as much of the effort and learning and work out of it so that we can then pass that on to the public, and the public can utilize these systems so that they can sustain themselves, whether it's here, anywhere, or out in the universe.
What is your timeline for these things to come about?
So like I said, we've already completed phase 1, which was our initial development of the systems and amalgamating the technology that we did have access to. Now, honestly, we're trying to sell some of those because we need to fund our research for phase 2, which is the introduction of artificial intelligence and robotics into the system. But it's not that expensive, and it's not that huge a leap of what we're trying to do. The other interesting thing that we've done with our research is aquaponics was never considered a viable option for off-world because fish don't do well in low gravity. Their bones start to suffer, they don't thrive. But in our research, what we discovered was NASA had already done research showing that eels that don't have bones do survive and do thrive in space. So now what we've been doing is introducing eels into our systems and starting to develop it so that they can be tested, in low gravity environments. And we're really excited about that.
How did you figure out that eels would work?
We're really proud of it. It was just, this is what we do, and this is what I do all the time pretty much, is I basically am just researching. I'm always on the hunt for whatever the most cutting edge research is or farm tech is so that we can incorporate it into our system.
What have you learned throughout this process?
I came across the eels, and then I started looking for it, and what I discovered was about 500 years ago in Japan, they were doing aquaponic gardens utilizing eels. So we went back into a lot of the histories, and we started, like, finding old pictographs and reading, getting the translations so that we could, see how they were integrating eels into their aquaponic system. And then we took that and the NASA information and combined it. So it really was the combination between, like, this ancient human knowledge in aquaculture and the most cutting edge NASA research that we were able to bring together. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of that.
Are you noticing a resurgence in the market?
What I see is whether it's here, whether it's people that are trying to figure out, more ecological ways of living on Earth or are spread out into the universe, we live in a time where people are looking for solutions. A lot of my research, and I try not to go too much into it because it is kind of doom and gloom, is that fundamentally we have to evolve now. The ability of the planet to sustain us, just like I was talking about the amount of land or the amount of water that we've taken out of the water tables in the last decade, it's all accelerating. And that was what first led me to this, was the realization that, although the systems we've become accustomed to are highly proficient at delivering things to us, they're exhausting our resources. And unfortunately, it's a part of human nature. There's a term that I came across a long time ago called delta, which is for an organism to change, the pain of change has to become less than the pain of staying the same. And that's built into human nature. And it can create quite catastrophic scenarios where, yes, we're heading towards this cliff where there's not enough land, there's not enough water, but there's more and more and more people. But it's so profitable to just do things the way that we've always done things before, the impetus for change isn't there. And that's why I'm out here delivering this message. That's why I'm out here talking about these systems and their necessity, because it doesn't matter about our expansion into the universe or our survival here on Earth. For humanity to have a future, we have to embrace our destiny of creating ecological systems that will lead to paradise. And the reality is, those systems exist. The technology's there. It's just not profitable yet for us to implement them. So, what I feel is I'm in a race to try to get this message out there so that as it becomes more and more apparent that this is a cliff that we're heading towards, that we can utilize our human potential, which is humans are the only animal on Earth that can conceptualize the future. And that brings us, great horror sometimes, because we think about all the pain and all of the potential bad things that can happen to us, but it also allows us to deal with problems and to understand problems and to solve them before they can destroy us. So that's what I'm betting on, is that humanity can arise to the occasion, and we can be smart enough to evolve past our own complacency. And that in doing so, we'll unlock not only the potential of this world, but all other worlds.
How did this first start?
I started at first, very selfishly, I was like, okay, I read all these problems and I was like, how can I make sure my family can survive? And then I started to realize, I was like, for my family to survive, my community has to survive. And for my community to survive, we have to come up with, solutions that can help civilization survive. And so the scale up, wasn't that hard for me to do, but ever since then, I've lived inside of this. I've just been trying to figure out, how do we solve this problem? How do we head off this disaster at the pass before it, becomes so unbalanced in our lives that we can't recover from it?
Why are we seeing a resurgence with this generation of new thinkers and people trying to proactively problem solve?
Well, the internet and communications technologies today, they bring so much of the world right into our homes. And what I watched and what had an effect on me is, we saw Katrina, we saw Harvey, we saw Puerto Rico. Continually, people are experiencing and beginning to understand that it doesn't matter how good or bad the government is, what politicians are in play, we can't count on being saved anymore. People can't afford, civilization itself can't afford the attitude that there's some outside force that's going to come always and take care of everything. We have to begin to implement solutions, and it starts with implementing these systems and these technologies at community levels so that people have the capability of taking care of themselves. I think that drive is in humanity, but it's also growing. You look at the explosion of the preparedness market over the last decade. If you turn on CNN or Fox News or any major news channel and you watch during the commercials, you know what the primary commercials are? It's gold, it's silver, and it's food disaster kits. And it's because people that pay attention have an understanding that as civilization becomes more complex, it actually becomes more susceptible to disruption, not less susceptible to disruption. So I think that we've reached this crux point where people are starting to inherently understand that, and so the drive for being self-sufficient, being able to self-sustain is growing. And that's what I first faceted on, is I was looking at aquaponic systems myself, and I was like, and I taught myself everything about it, and then I got a group of experts and put the company together. But it was, to manage this system and be efficient at it, you have to learn about aquaculture, you have to learn about botany, you have to learn about plumbing, and you have to figure out how to put all these things together and to make it work. That's a big learning curve. But the percentage of people that are willing to do that is growing every year. And so what I said is, well, let's take the learning curve out of it. Let's automate it. Let's lay out all of the planning so that all of it can be delivered to an end client where it's turnkey operational from day one. They just have to tell us how many people they're trying to feed so we can scale the system to be the appropriate size for them. That's what I'm betting on, is that that's the kind of future that the people want to live in. People want to live in a future where they know that their children are going to be taken care of, not by some outside force, but by their own means.
What would you say to the next generation to further inspire them to pick up this mantle?
We have a choice, and it's the great choice of our age, is our technology is reaching a point that we have to collectively make a decision. Will technology be used to set humanity free, or will technology be used to control humanity? Both paths are equally viable and in front of us right now. We can live in a world where artificial intelligence and 5G and the smart grid of things, where every idea, every movement, everything we'll ever do will be tracked and controlled, and we will be supplied for by monolithic Googles and monolithic Amazons that will, be the total power centers of everything that is, but we'll have no control and no autonomy. Or we can choose instead to invest that technology at community levels and at the individual levels to where every person can be empowered. Every family can have total control over where their food's coming from, where their power's coming from. That's the kind of future that I want. And that's the kind of future that I'm betting on humanity, that even though we've created these monolithic power structures that are amazingly efficient at giving us everything that we want, that there's something beyond that. And the something beyond that is the empowerment of the human individual. I think that's what calls to the human spirit. That's what I'm betting on, and that's what I want to stand for in this time. And that's the message that I would like to pass on to young people.